What is up, everybody? My full disclosure, my internet died like as the intro music was playing, but I'm back, Rich. This is the Sharp Angles podcast for your Thursday morning. I am Raymond Summerlin with apparently spotty internet. I didn't know that. I appreciate that AT&T. So hopefully I'll stick around this entire episode. But you might be flying alone, Rich. So get
I was
ready
ready
for that.
to tee it up to go in, and you were there. When the screen lifted, you were just miraculously back.
No, my internet has been dying randomly for 2 days, and so I'm hopeful we get a good hour out of it. And then normally it doesn't happen in repetition, so I'm hopefully we get a good hour out of it, and then I'm gonna have to go downstairs and figure out what's going on with that. But that's fine. That's a future problem. In the present, I have internet, and we're good to go. And we're here to talk about Week 10 of the fantasy football season. Before I do that, though, I do want to mention that if you're listening to this as a podcast, that's awesome. We really appreciate it. But we do this live every single Thursday at 11:30 Eastern. So you can come and talk to us, get involved in the conversation. We'll answer questions if you ask them in the chat over on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Warren Sharp, and you can find us. And the other reason to listen to it live this week is that today is the final day of our free week promotion. We are giving away 7 days free of all of our featured content, Warren Sharp's betting recommendations for the NFL, sides, totals, props, Rich Hribar's fantasy content, the worksheet. All of that is available. You get 7 days free trial over at the website. Just go to sharp.football and you can find all the information you need for that. And what's cool about this 7-day trial is that if you get it today on Thursday, listen to this on Friday, we have some other great deals. You can go to the website, check them out. But if you do it on Thursday, you do it today, you're going to get all of the content for week 10, all of Rich's worksheets, all the bets and recommendations. And then you'll also get all the week 11 content during that 7-day trial because all the worksheets come out on Tuesday and on Wednesday. And so you're going to get all of that as well, all the early betting recommendations in week 11. So you get a lot of content in that 7 days if you sign up today. Just go over to sharp.football, check that out, and it'll be there. For week 10, the first kind of thing I want to talk about is if you looked at the primetime games for this week, it
Hey,
is a
listen,
disaster, Rich.
I know that tonight I will have no restrictions on watching the season finale of Loki. I'm pretty sure that Taysom Bejan and Bryce Young will not keep me around. I won't miss much if I have to leave for an hour.
It's rough. And then on Sunday night we
Yeah,
get
Jets.
Aiden O'Connell against the Jets defense and Zach Wilson against himself, I guess. And so it's going to be just a disaster of a game. I am kind of interested. I have to be honest. I'm kind of interested in Broncos Bills. Bills need to win.
Yeah,
Broncos obviously before the bye beat the Chiefs. We've talked about their defense. They've actually been playing better than
it'll
you
be a
think the
competent
Broncos
NFL
have been
game.
playing. Yeah, and that'll be a fine NFL game. So we'll get that. But man, these first two, how did we arrive here? I saw a tweet something about I
Every
don't know
year,
the
man.
rules, and so maybe the rules are that if you flex this one, you can't flex another one in the future. But NBC decided not to flex out of Raiders Jets, and I don't know how you would arrive at that decision.
Well,
So
I believe that don't certain networks they can protect certain games that they
any
have.
game is
So,
better than this game.
but
Literally,
then I mean, New York market though, it is what it is.
maybe, man. I mean, any game. I'd rather watch Pittsburgh Green Bay than
I mean,
I'm
my thought it's the NFL. Like, I mean, how many people are going to watch this Carolina Bears game? Like, they're still going to get so many more ratings than any NBA game that's on tonight. And like,
no,
there's
absolutely.
so there's so much more you could do with your lives. But you can
Yeah,
gamble though. You can gamble
our
though.
livelihood our livelihood relies on how much people care about the NFL, and you're on here like, no, you can watch the Loki finale. You could you go to the park, you can see your children, you can do all these other things rather than rather than watching the games. All right, so let's move on. Let's move on to our favorite segment of the week here. Maybe our second favorite segment. I like Uncut Gems better. But our second favorite segment, Real or Fake. We actually have some interesting ones to discuss this week. A few weeks ago, I think it was before the headache game. We discussed Bejan Robinson and his workload and some troubling quotes that came from Arthur Smith about how he wanted to protect Bejan. It kind of seemed like he was worried about Robinson hitting the rookie wall. And since that headache game, we had that game, and that game, that's just an outlier. That is what it is. But since then, we've continued to see him not used. He has not had more than 53% of the running back carries in a game since week 4. His target share is hovering around 15%. It's just been bad, and I kind of think we're at the point that Bijan Robinson, is he kind of just like a better version of James Cook? Is that where we are with Robinson? Is that where we kind of have to treat him for fantasy, given his lack of goal to go touches, given his lack of, share of the backfield touches? Like, where are we with this guy?
Yeah, I mean, so currently James Cook, but like still like in the potential like range of outcomes, it's better because there's no Josh
Yeah.
Allen on like
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
Because that's the other thing is like Josh Allen, just like you look at Josh Allen's rushing log, like he scored a touchdown in 6 of the past 7 games. That's the other hurdle. Because like the Bijan Robinson in his current state absolutely is, but and we talked about it a couple weeks ago that like the only reason he kept continuously getting ranked as like an RB1 because it was the landscape of the position, but like his usage has never been there in terms of context of his peers. And we shouldn't really, until like we get evidence of it changing, shouldn't just expect it to change. We've done this with Arthur Smith before with the hopium infused of like, this is how he should use this player with Kyle Pitts for years, and we never got it. So
Yeah.
like we shouldn't expect it to change. I will say for this particular week in isolation, even if Bijan Robinson is still in the Bijan Robinson role, he can probably have an effective game against the Cardinals. But 100%, he lives in a spectrum where you look at all his usage stats. It definitely signals more like upside RB2 than locked in RB1 for sure.
There is an important aspect of this that we're not discussing, and that's that Arthur Smith shaved his mustache. And I wonder if this is like in every movie you've ever seen. I wonder if this is going from evil Arthur Smith back to good Arthur Smith. Like, we're gonna go back to Tennessee Arthur Smith, who just ran Derrick Henry as many times as possible. We're gonna get that with Bijan Robinson. I mean, I don't think so. I do think it's a good point that this particular situation and this particular matchup is a really good spot for him, especially if you're playing DFS. Like, if that's where you're really focused on, then given the disappointment we've had from Robinson, even in the spot, I mean, is he going to be less popular than he otherwise should be? I don't know, but it is risky here. I will say another out we haven't really seen this yet, but Heineke has throughout his career an above average target rate to running backs, and we haven't seen that happen for Robinson yet, but maybe there's an out as well. But yeah, it's just a whole lot of hoping. Copium. I like that term with Arthur Smith. It's a whole lot of hoping and praying and see what happens. But I mean, as long as Gino Smith is going to be as involved as Kyle Pitts, then I don't really know. I don't really know if we could have any faith in this.
Yeah, I kind of wrote it up too. I will say this though, like if you're a fantasy gamer and like you're either holding Bijan or you're like thinking of acquiring because someone's dumping him, he still has like in his range of outcomes for like this 2 shift. Again, that is hopium infused. But like when you look at some of the other guys like in that bucket, like what do the dominoes have to fall for those guys to like elevate tiers? Like James Cook, right? Like James Cook would need Josh Allen to not be involved in the goal line. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think this situation is going to probably end up what the Lions situation looks like too, but just better version of it. I think we're going to see like Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan have similar workloads, and then Monty as a better version of Algier and have more like stuff in between the 20s than Algier gets. But basically the same thing. And we're going to create like this another like kind of timeshare where we're hoping to catch the touchdowns. But those guys need injuries. Like Bijan, it's still like all he needs is for Arthur Smith to realize what he's doing isn't working. Because if it was working, none of us would really even be able to throw anything back in his face, right? Like, or just a question. There wouldn't be a question. If they were scoring in all these short yardage situations and Tyler Algier was like absolutely smashing, we'd be like, hey, he's doing that. Like, that's just rational coaching. But the Falcons are 30th in the NFL in scoring rate and goal to go situations. Like, what he's doing isn't working.
And Tyler Algier wasn't good in goal to go situations last year either. Even though he had a really good season, he was not good in those situations either. And so they keep using him in these places where he didn't show well last year. He hasn't been successful this year. And you would, again, hope that you would recognize that that's not working the way that that's happening and try something else. Even, by the way, if that something else is Cordero Patterson. Cordero Patterson has been good in that area at points throughout his Falcons career, and he had a tweet earlier this week suggesting that he is unhappy with his current state and current role,
It's going, other
and
than
so
that, it's
that's
going great there.
buddy. They're all of the sides. The combativeness, I mentioned this on the Sunday recap show, the combativeness of Arthur Smith, the kind of locker room vibes we're getting from kind of the leaks and the tweets we're seeing, all of that is like that this is going to end soon. If they lose to the Cardinals, right, Arthur Smith is gone. Like, would that be he's gone? Like at that
I
point?
don't know. I don't know. I don't know where Arthur Blank stands on the situation, but I know where we stand.
Well, we don't stand because the Falcons are the team of sharp football this year.
It's
We were
true.
so we looked at their schedule, we looked at the talent they had, we thought the defense would be better, and it was before recently. It's been an absolute sieve recently. But we thought all those things. We thought in this division they could win the division, they could make the playoffs, and maybe go over their total. And that was really the bet. It wasn't that they were, a top 10 team. It was the division's not good. Their schedule's pretty easy. They're going to be able to kind of fake their way into the playoffs as a result of that. And they haven't even been able to do that. And that is a massive concern, especially since defense gets worse. Now they face Kyler Murray. I mean, it seems like Kyler Murray is going to be close to full health. They gave him a long time to get ready for this. So could Kyler Murray and that offense that's kind of been overachieving with James Conner back, could they score a lot on this defense and force Taylor Heineke to have to do something? It could happen. And if they lose to the Cardinals, that's
And the
it's a
worst
tough
part for the
spot.
Falcons is how do you get out of this, right? Like you already
You draft a
won too many
quarterback.
games. I mean, but you already won too many games. Like you're not picking high. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like they're going to be right in purgatory again.
Yeah, they are. I mean, the good thing is that this quarterback class is well regarded enough that even if you're picking 10 to 15, you might be able to get someone that you can at least convince yourself in. You're not going to get Caleb Williams, you're not going to get Drake May, but you have that weird kind of 3 to 6 quarterback range that people seem to be getting excited about. I am not a draft expert. I'm not going to act like I've watched
Right.
a ton of Riley Leonard, but it seems like people are getting kind of excited about that 3 to 6, 7 range. So maybe that's a way out. We'll have to see where they go from here. Another team that finally made a good coaching decision was the Houston Texans, who for the season are 30th in neutral pass rate, which is early downs and taking out games where the win probability is under 20% or above 80%, and they were 25th in pass rate over expected for the season. Last week, however, they were fifth in neutral pass rate. They were 4% over their expected pass rate, and C.J. Stroud repaid their faith immensely with an amazing game, just an absolutely great game that really showed all the things that we have been in this website have been excited about from CJ Stroud as a prospect too early in the season. You can go back into the archives and us talking about and writing about how well CJ Stroud was playing. That previous approach, that run heavy approach, that cost them a win that would have had them in a really good spot in the playoff picture. That cost them a win against the Panthers. They immediately
Mm-hmm.
changed against the Bucks. And the question is this real? Is this what we're going to see moving forward? Or was that a factor of maybe some offensive line situations, Damian Pierce being out? How do you see this? Is this a change or is this kind of a blip for us?
I mean, you would hope that it's a coaching staff that's new, and we hope that they get the benefit of the doubt of saying that maybe there was some self scouting, especially coming off of a bad loss, like a really bad loss that they shouldn't have
Right.
had.
Yeah.
I wrote about it last week too in the worksheet and been leading in for CJ Stroud. I was like, with Damian Pierce being out, Tunsil being back, like it would be a hell of a time, Bobby Sloak, if you wanted to be aggressive. Like, everything's here for you. And early on, they came out the first drive, they threw on first down, they went 3 and out, and I was like, oh man, it didn't work. They're gonna go back, and they started running the ball. Devin Singletary just wasn't getting anything, and then they just finally took the brakes up. We're not handing off to Devin Singletary anymore. They had a season high 59.4% drop back on first downs last week, and Stroud was 16 of 19 for 298 yards with 4 touchdowns on first down passes.
Is that good? Is that
It
good?
seems
Rich?
decent. Seems decent. I will check. Yes, a 158.3 quarterback rating. You cannot go higher. I think that is good. I think that is good. So you would hope that they would say, this team hasn't been able to run the football all year. They haven't.
Yeah.
There's just like no evidence
Even
that
if
they don't
Damon
run the
Pierce is
football.
healthy, you
Yes.
can't run the football. So it doesn't matter. His health does not matter. You cannot run the football. Like that's in
One of
full
the
stop.
biggest things that pushed me to Stroud and DFS last week was when Damon Pierce was ruled out. Because I was like, man, if anyone wants to play Devin Singletary, then it is what it is. But because
Hey,
we had evidence.
hey,
Uh,
I had Devin Singletary as like an uncut gem 2 weeks ago. So don't come
yeah.
at me about.
But
I was getting excited about usage.
we had already had a game where Damian Pierce had 100% of the backfield carries and touches, and wasn't even an RB2 that week. Like, so like this team just can't run the football. They fundamentally can't run. I like Damian. I think Damian Pierce is a really good football player, but like top down, they can't run the football. And the strength of this passing game is not only CJ Stroud, but like they have good pass catchers. Like Tank Dell is wide open almost every play. Tank Dell, you got Dalton Schultz is functional, and like you've got kind of like the veteran wide receiver 3 package of Robert Woods, who's available, and Noah Brown. So like they have good pass catchers. Like they should totally swerve into this.
No, absolutely. This should be what they do. And again, we're assuming rational coaching. We have a good feeling about this coaching staff from where they're coming from, that they're going to be able to do
He's
that.
a
And we
Twitter
saw
guy,
that
Bobby
shift last
Slowick,
week.
man. We gotta like he was one of our own. Like he was supposed to be one of us. So like we gotta at least hold
Exactly.
out hope.
We're holding out hope that this is what we'll see moving forward. And what I'll say, if this is a shift and we're going to see this change of just letting CJ Stroud rip it, they're going to be bad games. Like he's a rookie quarterback. He is going to have bad games. That is just what happens. But I think for the most part, he's going to be a pretty good fantasy asset. And if you look at the fantasy playoffs for him, he does get the Browns in week 16, which is tough. But sandwich around that is the Titans in week 15 and the Titans again in week 17. And that is about as good of a situation as you could hope for a fantasy quarterback in the playoffs. So hopefully this is something we see continue. Hopefully this entire passing game can be one of those that really I can't even propels teams. There's the word.
Yeah.
Propels teams here in the second half of the season.
I don't even
And
know
we
how
can
he
see this.
loses rookie of the year at this point. Like I don't even know how it
Yeah.
happened.
No, it's impossible. Like he is uh, if he gets hurt right now,
I still think he'd win it.
yeah, he would still
Maybe.
who else would be the options? If even if he gets hurt right now,
Well,
who
yeah.
is even our options? Yeah, no, that's a fair point. We got a question here in the chat. Start Dante Foreman or James Conner this
Oh, because
week.
he's got tonight.
Herbert's
Yeah.
projected for 0. Yeah, Herbert.
Herbert's
This
not
is
gonna
a
play.
tonight question. Yeah, Herbert's not going to play. At least Tom Pelissero of NFL Network reports that Herbert is not going to play. I will say this about Foreman. Foreman had 59% snap share last week. He was very clearly the lead back. He had 20 carries against the Saints in a close game. You would project this to be a close game. So he's in a good spot. But I think with Kyler back, with what you've seen from James Conner when he was healthy, and we're assuming that since he's coming back, he is healthy. I think I probably go with James Conner there, but that's close to me. What do you think?
I would rather play James Conner. I mean, obviously they haven't made him officially active, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's a
so, like
risk for sure.
that's the thing that you run into. It's like you can because it's not like Foreman has a good matchup. He also has the element of like we could have something like play out like 3 weeks ago too, where or 2 weeks ago, where it's like a 3-way committee, and
Yeah.
it's really oscillated the Bears backfield. Like we don't really have like a pattern to like really glom onto. So like, could he get 12 touches? Could he get 20 touches? Like all of that plays into it. He would be the safer play if you're worried about Connor not playing. I would rather hold out for Connor if I had the option. So if you even have another guy like a pivot for Connor, because he might just be asking to start sit of just these two players. But if you have even an alternative to say like, well, if Connor doesn't go, I can still play Keaton Mitchell or whatever,
Yeah.
you have a pivot.
Deontay Ingram, because DeMercado is it was fun while it lasted, DeMercado. We'll remember you fondly, but he's not going to play this week. Yeah, no, I think that's in a vacuum. If both these guys are playing, I'd rather Connor, especially based on what we saw from this offense early in the season. All right, one more here for real or fake, and that is the legend, the absolute legend that is Joshua Dobbs, the Konami
Yes,
King,
he is a legend.
Joshua Dobbs. So obviously, from a real football perspective, what happened is that him coming back and winning that game. What was it? 4 days, 5 days after joining the Vikings, he hadn't even had practice reps. He didn't expect to play. Obviously, amazing. From a fantasy perspective, though, and this has been the case with Dobbs even when he was in Arizona, is we have seen him consistently stack rushing production. He rushed for 66 yards and a touchdown in the Vikings debut. He has a touchdown, a rushing touchdown in 3 straight games, 4 total this season. Only Anthony Richardson, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Josh Allen have more rushing fantasy points per game than Dobbs this season. Is he our Konami king? Are we in a situation where, especially if Justin Jefferson is back, we are going to trust Dobbs in high end quarterback 2, back end quarterback 1? Is that where we are in this season? Is that where we arrived here?
I mean, he's a traditional Konami guy, like because
Yeah.
the passing's bad, and like he's able to create this floor through the rushing weight, like the component of just how rushing scored in fantasy football.
Mm.
So like he's more of a throwback guy, like when Taysom Hill, he's like very much on the old Taysom Hill spectrum when he was starting. So like the weeks where you don't get the rushing, like they look really bad. But like
It's
he's able
awful.
to kind of flirt with like this QB1 production and high end QB2 stuff through kind of the mobility stuff. I mean, he's now rushed for over 40 yards in six games. That's a passing touchdown he's added, right? Like it's just like if you converted those, that's at least one passing touchdown. That's not even
But
counting the rushing touchdown.
what's hilarious about that though is the other 2 games he has like zero. It's like -2 rushing yards in
Yes.
his other 2 games. So it's me on a diet. It's either all in or it's all bad, baby. Like it's either cheat day or we're not eating anything. That is where we are with Dobbs as a rusher. It's the weirdest. He has the weirdest game log I've ever seen. Like
Yeah.
it's insane what's going on.
The only thing that you can kind of question about it is like, because last week was kind of more of a jailbreak scenario, whereas the Arizona stuff,
Yeah,
a
for
lot of
sure.
the rushing was manufactured. Like they were running a lot of QB design stuff. And I don't know, we haven't seen like Kevin O'Connell just hasn't had a quarterback like that. Like really that system
Mm.
hasn't had one. So like how much are they going to incorporate like the actual Josh Dobbs, like the called run plays? Because if you're getting those, then you have like some bankability. But I will say he becomes an interesting guy, especially in these 2 QB leagues, because it sounds like Justin Jefferson will come back at some point. Maybe not this week or next week, but will be back. You have Hawkinson. We've talked about Josh Dobbs' affinity for the tight end position. You've got Jordan Addison. Like he's got better players than they had in Arizona, and he was so like on the cusp, like where he was. So like you at least have to treat it as worst a lateral move, if not better.
Yeah, I think that that's fair. And yeah, it doesn't seem like Jefferson's playing this week, but he's coming back. And the other part of aspect of that, if you look at it from Jefferson's side, is Dobbs has not been a great passer by any stretch of the imagination. But I at least have more faith in him keeping Jefferson a quality fantasy asset than I would have in Jaron Hall, which is just a terrible kind of turn of events for Jaron Hall. We hope he's okay. But I still think I have more faith in Dobbs keeping him, Jefferson, and especially Hawkinson because of those splits we have with him with tight ends. I have more faith in them being quality fantasy options the rest of the way here with Dobbs. Also, the Vikings might just mess around and make the playoffs. Like they
It's
might
the
that might
NFC.
happen.
It's the NFC.
It's the
It could.
NFC. They might just mess around and make the playoffs, which would be I think that would be the funniest outcome here of this entire
You,
situation.
you always give me grief for not liking coaches, but I will say Kevin O'Connell is one dude I absolutely believe gets it.
Yeah, I think so too. Like they had Jaron Hall, and unfortunately, the concussion happened, but they had Jaron Hall running, which I know because we had Jaron Hall over rushing yards that was almost hit before even he left with injury, and I'm not bitter about that at all. I'm not upset. Don't write in the paper that I was upset. All right, we actually have a few interesting games this week. A few games that are I don't know if they're prove it games, but they're opportunities for teams that maybe don't have a signature win or a signature win recently to or are free falling or like we have just some really interesting situations. And one of them is the 49ers in the Jaguars. 49ers obviously lost 3 in a row before the bye, coming off the bye against this Jaguars team that probably isn't getting the respect that their record would suggest and that some of their wins would suggest that they deserve. I mean, this team has beat the Bills. They've had a very good season. And so this is another opportunity for the Jaguars to say, yeah, we're real. The 49ers need to get a win. So it's a really interesting kind of game from a real football perspective. But from a fantasy perspective, there's also interesting situations. And one of them is the 49ers defense. What is this defense? If you look at what they did in the first 5 weeks, they were third in yards per play. They were fourth in points per drive allowed. over the 3-game losing streak, they were 30th in yards per play and 27th in points per drive allowed. So, what is this defense? I mean, they added Chase Young, but their pressure rate really wasn't the problem during that run. They have kind of a quiet smoke and mirrors secondary over the last couple years that has given up plays, especially on the outside. So I don't know what to think of this defense. I kind of think that maybe they're not that good, and maybe what we've seen over their last 3 games, it's not that bad, but is more indicative of what this defense is, and it's not a matchup to run from. Where are you on this defense?
Yeah, I think that's the NFL, like from a top-down stance, though. Like we just don't. We're not in an era where like we have like these like smothering defenses. Like there's just not a lot of them. And the 49ers have a lot of talent on their defense, but it is kind of segregated to like the front of their defense, like the front seven. Their front seven is just loaded now. I mean, you just look at the name
Amazing.
the name power alone. I mean, you got Bosa and Young now on the outside, Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead in the middle. You got Fred Warner, you got Greenlaw at linebacker. Like that's like if you're building a team, like you're gonna be like if you reshuffled all the defensive players and put them in a draft, you couldn't get all those guys on the same team. You couldn't do it. But on the outside and on the back end, like they're exploitable, and that's kind of how the structure of this team's been built for a couple of years. And they will give up big plays, and that's where the Jaguars, I think, have to go and attack them. I think they have to attack them. The Jaguars should try to be aggressive. The Jaguars are another one of these teams that they do play offense a little passively, especially for their personnel. And I would like to see them actually come out and like see one of these Trevor Lawrence stamp games, right? Like we haven't gotten a lot of those. Like him and Herbert are kind of on that same spectrum where like if you were making a quarterback, they would look a lot like Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence, but like it just hasn't coalesced into like the apex outcome for either guy yet. So I would love to see the Jaguars come out of this game, say, you know what, we are going to use Trevor Lawrence and use these our pass catchers, and we're going to attack the 49ers where they're most vulnerable. That's what the Bengals did. Like that, that's what they should do. So like it's be curious. It's giving them some faith, but that's what I would do if I was them.
Yeah, that actually raises an interesting point about what you do with the Jaguars wide receivers, because Calvin Ridley has been so up and down, and so you're going to try to pick spots for him. And if that's the case, if that's what they're going to try to do in this situation based on his usage, this would be another Calvin Ridley spot. We discussed it ahead of their bye against the Steelers that was a Calvin Ridley spot, and he, it wasn't a great game, but he did have one of his better games of the season.
Mhm.
This kind of looks like a Calvin Ridley spot as well. And so maybe they're going to continue to do that. We're going to see them push the ball on the outside and down the field where Ridley has been getting his targets. What I will say is that Zay Jones practiced on Wednesday, and a lot of the structural changes that we've discussed on this podcast with Christian Kirk playing more and Calvin Ridley's average depth of target skyrocketing and being used more outside the numbers, a lot of that coincided with Zay Jones's injury. And so I wonder if Zay Jones comes back, are we going to see a shift to more what we saw in weeks 1 and 2, where Calvin Ridley was playing more around the line of scrimmage and Christian Kirk wasn't playing as much because they weren't playing a ton of 11 personnel and he wasn't being used when only 2 wide receivers were on the field as much. So there's a lot of uncertainty about this Jaguars passing game that's kind of hilariously built around Zay Jones and what we're going to see from this offense once he does end up getting back on the field.
Yeah, and I would be surprised if he's a 100% player, given all the commentary that they've had, that Doug Peterson's had. He didn't open the week practicing, and Doug Peterson actually, out of a bye, he didn't open up the week practicing. Doug Peterson said he was going to be potentially a candidate, just go on IR to get this thing right. And then he practiced yesterday, which I wonder if they wanted to see him practice and see how he responded. And see how he did. So I would be surprised even if he plays. He's a 100% player this week. But again, I think both these teams have like we haven't seen them have their full cupboard of wide receivers, like their full disposal of weapons this season. We don't have a huge sample of everyone playing together. The 49ers have a multi-year sample. Like we've seen Kittle, Debo, and Ayuk on the field together a lot more than we have, the Jaguars adding Ridley and like seeing how all these pieces fit together, where they've really only had 2 games where all 3 of those guys have been together. That's kind of been the case of the 49ers too, but we have a larger sample of knowing where those pieces fit together.
Yeah, that's true. And on the 49ers side of it, Debo is coming back this week, and that does change kind of the structure of their offense a little bit. It specifically changes everything for George Kittle. I mean, the George Kittle splits are real without one of the wide receivers on the field. Kittle had 14 catches for 227 yards over the last 2 games. He had 18 catches for 216 yards for the first 6 games. If you look at his splits over the last 2 seasons, over the last 2 years with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk both on the field, he has a 15.8% target rate per route and a 13.7% team target share. If either one of those receivers are off the field or both of them are off the field, he has a 24% target rate per route and a 23.5% target share. Those are significant, meaningful differences. And I think that if you're looking at George Kittle in DFS, we run into this issue all the time in the kind of fantasy world we live in. If you have George Kittle, you're starting George Kittle
Yeah,
in a
what are you gonna
redraft
do?
league because what other tight end is out there, and you could get 2 touchdowns from him, and it kind of is what it is. But from a DFS perspective, or if you're betting props, for instance, I think Kittle unders might be very interesting this week. Like there are a lot of opportunities here to understand that what we've seen from Kittle the last 2 games is probably not what we're going to see here with Ayuk and Samuel back, unless the 49ers make a change to what we've seen over the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've done it for years. When one of those guys is out, you smash Kittle, you smash the props, you smash him in DFS, and then when these guys are here, you just hope he luck boxes into a big play.
Yeah. And then Christian McCaffrey. Are we playing Christian McCaffrey, Rich? You think that's
I don't know, man. Damian Pierce might miss this week again.
yeah. Yeah, if you're missing Dameon Pierce, you can shove Christian McCaffrey there. Actually, yeah, are the 2 best fantasy running backs right now? Are they playing in this game? Is it Etienne and McCaffrey? Are those 1 and 2 rest of season rankings?
I think if we were drafting right now, they'd be the 1-2 picks. You might get Breece Hall, like probably pretty close in that mix, but given the Jet situation, maybe some pullback there. But yeah, they'd be 1-2 for sure.
Yeah. So if you need a running back, check the waiver wire. And, anyway, another interesting game we have here is the Lions and Chargers. The Lions probably are kind of in a similar situation that maybe they're not getting the respect they deserve. It doesn't help that they were absolutely demolished by the Baltimore Ravens a few weeks ago.
Ravens are doing that to some teams.
The Ravens are. I struggled. I do the power rankings over at sharpfootballanalysis.com, a great website. You should go visit it. And I couldn't move the Eagles out of number 1 after they had just beaten the Cowboys.
No.
But I think the Ravens are the best team in the NFL. And we'll see if that continues. We'll see if, we need Lamar to stay healthy. But I think the Ravens are the best team in the NFL. And that's kind of where I stand on it. Where are you kind of in that situation?
I think they're definitely one of the best teams. It's tough. I mean, they lost the game to Gardner Minshew. They lost the game to Kenny Pickett. So
losing the game to Gardner Minshew, that was a rough one. That was definitely a tough one. But the one to Pickett, that was before their international game. We know how that works out for everybody. So
but they're definitely one of the best
Colts
teams. The teams they've waxed though are NFC kind of fugazis though. Like I like the Lions and I like the Seahawks. I like both of those teams, and I think that they can do damage in the NFC, but like they're still not like an actual Super Bowl contender where the Ravens are a Super Bowl contender. Like if the Ravens were in the NFC, like holy, they'd be them and the Eagles, man. Them Eagles Niners, man, like cooking.
Yeah, no, there'd be no question about them. That is the thing is that maybe those games in the context of the NFC, the Seahawks and Lions are really good. Maybe those games just show how much better the AFC is than the NFC at this point. Because I mean, the Eagles have lost 1 game, and I don't even think that they've played well.
But Lamar's been incredible. like if anyone's statistically, I know Lamar's out here apologizing to fantasy gamers for the last 2 weeks because they've got 6 rushing touchdowns. Like, what are you going to do? But Lamar has been absolutely incredible this year.
Yeah, just shredded. And in fact, you go back to that game against the Lions. We're going to move on to the Lions and Chargers here. You go back to that game against the Lions. He had 12.8 yards per attempt and 357 passing yards against this Lions defense. That is a level that he's been playing at. It hasn't worked for fantasy since then, but that's the level they've been playing.
He's by far completing the highest rate. He leads the NFL in completion rate right now, actually. He's by far his highest completion rate. And like it hasn't even come together for the Ravens for like what the plan was either. Like the plan was to play more 11 personnel, and like the wide receivers have been banged up outside of Zay Flowers, and they haven't really even been able to do that and structurally even play the offense they desire to play, and it's still gone this well.
Yeah, and they've had injuries in the backfield. They've had all sorts of this entire team has had injury issues all season long, and they still are where they are, which I would be if I was an AFC foe, that would worry me to kind of see where we are. But moving on to this game and the Lions defense, which I think is a good place to start. If you look at the Lions defense and kind of what they've done this season, it is the overall numbers are pretty good. And they had that game against the Chiefs where they held down, the Chiefs, and you've seen that game maybe is giving them a little bit more. I don't know what the word is, but maybe we think of them a
A
little bit more
cachet,
highly than
maybe.
we should because cachet, that's it, because of that. But the Seahawks had 8 yards per pass attempt, 311 yards. We talked about what the Ravens did. I think I think this Lions defense maybe is might just be bad, just like it was last year. And if that's the case, then perhaps this is a good right spot for Justin Herbert. Because every time they played a good offense, a good passing game, aside from that Chiefs game in the first one, it hasn't gone well for them.
Yeah, the Herbert stuff is tough because we're running into the same issues we had last year, right? Like it's the players that this offense now has to funnel through are just not explosive players. Keenan Allen at this stage of his career he's a great football player and a really good football player, but like he's not going to blow like the top off of a defense like at this stage of his career. Austin Eckler they can't run the football. Austin Eckler is ahead of only Josh Jacobs in explosive run rate. Like this team just can't generate explosives right now with their personnel. We're back in the same boat we were last year. And they were kind of hoping Quentin Johnston would be that guy, but like they clearly have no idea what they're doing with Quentin Johnston because they had him running, vertical routes against Sauce Gardner on Monday night. So,
Uh, we
Godspeed.
we've talked about this mythical Wednesday meeting that we have that we've really enjoyed, and that is with all the whole Sharp football staff is in there, and that was one of the things I brought up is how do you fundamentally misunderstand the wide receiver that you drafted in the first round? How is that possible? That's where they've arrived. And like you said, they're running vertical routes and giving him vertical targets against Sauce Gardner, which is just if he couldn't do that in the Big 12. If he can't do that in the Big 12, it's not going to work against Gardner. Cincinnati didn't
Yeah.
play in the Big 12 when Gardner was there, right? So yeah, I still feel fine in this. So that is just a fundamental misunderstanding of who he is as a player. Maybe they're just forced into it. They need somebody to play that Mike Williams role, and it has to be him. Jalen Guyton's back. Maybe they can try to use Jalen Guyton some way in that. But yeah, it's been very
Our
odd to
cardio
see
king,
that he's
Jalen Guyton. He is a big
cardio
cardio
king.
guy. Just never
Yeah,
got targeted. Runs fast downfield. That's what he does. There's no NFL nuance of playing receiver, but we're in the same boat. And like Herbert, it hasn't been good since the Mike Williams injury. They played some really good defenses. They played the Chiefs, they played the Cowboys, they played the Jets. They played some really good teams, but like we're in the same boat of looking at this offense and saying, where do the big plays come from? Like, where do they come from in this offense? It's the same story. Like, it's the same thing we talked about ad nauseum about his A dot under. It didn't matter. There's nobody here that can create explosives in this offense. So everything has to be manufactured like it was 2 weeks ago against the Bears, right? But he actually had his lowest A dot of the season that game against the Bears, and they're able to generate those types of efficiency, the efficiency plays. That's a tough way to live in the NFL. Like it's really hard to consistently be that efficient with that type of offense where you're throwing a wide receiver screen that goes for 30 or a running back screen that goes for 30-yard touchdowns, right? Like it's a hard way to live in the NFL. And it's like, I just have a hard time seeing, even if Josh Palmer matters in this offense now, like his availability matters. And like, that's where we are with the Chargers offense. And that's crazy to me.
yeah. I do think that we, from a recency bias perspective, are thinking about that Jets game against. I mean, the Jets defense is
Oh,
legit. It is
sure.
really
Well,
one of.
all of them.
It
And
is
he's
one of those
Chiefs.
actually smothering defenses. Yeah, Chiefs are good too.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a hard schedule, but he also, you have the Raiders game. Like,
Yep.
it's just, I just look from a personnel stance, like, it's just, and Herbert's getting there for fantasy still. Like, last week was his first game where he wasn't a top 10 scorer. So, like, you don't have to run and hide from him, especially against, like you said, this Lions defense. But, like, are we going to have that run out where, like, he's like a top 3 guy, a potentially like top 6 guy? Or is it going to be a situation where, like, he's continuously just like plugging in like these back end QB1 games, right? That's kind of where it is. And, they have to find a way to get Quentin Johnston acclimated in some capacity or anything. Just maybe it is Jalen Guyton. I doubt it is, but maybe it's one of these tight ends, right? Like they try to figure out something, but it can't just be Keenan Allen, no run game, and hope Austin Eckler like has a splash play in the passing game. Like that's just a hard way to live in the NFL.
It's not Gerald Everett. I'm pretty sure of that. Maybe, yeah. Throw Donald Parham up the seam, and
I mean, they were one of these
he's
teams that needed
big
one of those
fella.
guys at the deadline, and I don't know. We never know. They have so much salary tied up into already Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Like we don't know what was available to them or what they could have gotten. But I mean, this team needs a speed infusion for sure. Maybe it's the other TCU kid, Darius Davis. Like play him
Darius
a little
Davis.
bit, and get him
He got
involved.
Yeah, he had the punt return or the kick return. Was it a punt? It was a punt return, and then he also had another catch. So he played a little bit more last week. I mean, he's not someone for fantasy you care about outside of single game. He did
Yeah,
me well at single game,
but they have to
this week.
try things though. They
They
need
have
to
to
try.
try.
They,
Yeah.
they have to try some of these things because, yeah, you can't just live this way.
Which, to be fair to them, maybe that is all they were doing with Quentin Johnson. Because early in the season, they did seem to have a strong understanding of where he needed to be used. So maybe they're just throwing things at the wall and hoping that he could
With
do
Palmer
something.
being
But
out, it could have been because Palmer was out, then
yeah,
just a domino effect. But yeah, I mean, this is a game I think they'll overall be more or less fine to good. Like if that makes sense. Like
yeah, I think that's kind of where we are with them as well. I think on the other side, though, Jared Goff, this is a smash spot for him, and that's actually an interesting question. Who do you have ranked higher this week, Goff or Herbert? Do you
Goff,
remember off the top of your head?
I do
Goff,
have
yeah,
Goff.
this is a really good spot for Goff, and I am I'm going to be interested in stacking this game, starting with Jared Goff. I think because this is going to be a really good spot for him.
His floor is lower. Like he's definitely more volatile than Herbert is. But and people will bring up the road stuff. I mean, this is indoors in LA. Like I'm definitely not factoring in any like
Against the team with the worst home field advantage in NFL history. Are we in NFL history territory with the home field advantage
potentially
here?
that it actually is. It actually probably is. And Vegas is probably closing in on that too because of just the destination they've created. But
Yeah.
definitely this Los Angeles, there will probably be a lot of Lions fans here in this game. I would 100% bank on it.
60% Lions fans, something like that. Is that what we're looking at? So yeah, so it'll just be a home game for Jared Goff. So we'll treat it as the home game. We'll have a home game split here for him.
Yeah, I mean the Chargers had a nice couple weeks here, a nice little reprieve of facing Tyson Bagent and Zach Wilson. But I mean, the only quarterbacks that have not thrown for more than 7 yards surpassed him against the Jaguars in a game are those two, Wilson Bagent and Aiden O'Connell in his first career start. I mean, they've given up top 5 scoring weeks to Tua, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins. They play a ton of zone, which Goff's thrown 11 of his 12 touchdown passes against zone. The Chargers are 10th in the NFL in zone rate. They play the cover 6 at the highest rate in the NFL. Goff has completed 40 of 50 passes against cover 6 this season. So, like, it all sets up for Jared Goff as well. To be like in a really strong spot coming out of the bye. And again, just to let you know, I do believe in Ben Johnson as well.
And there's another. We're finding all of your coach faves. Mr. Coaches Don't Matter has coach favorites. Who knew that? That's fascinating. I am interested in kind of the receiving game here. I mean, obviously Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta. Can we get more Jamison here? Is it going to be Donovan Peoples-Jones, or is he going to come in just to run wind sprints like he was doing in Cleveland? It'll be interesting to see how that. I mean, Josh Reynolds had seemed to be falling out of favor before that, and so I'm interested in kind of that second wide receiver situation, and if we even see them get involved. Do you have any leans there?
I don't think from a snap perspective, Reynolds will be the snap guy, but I think they're going to rotate a lot of these guys. Remember, Marvin Jones also retired for personal reasons. I think that left a hole that they wanted to fill. They still have Cleve Raymond too around the back end here. So I think that those guys will largely rotate with Josh Reynolds being kind of the lead. The problem with buying in on a Lions wide receiver too is that Sam Laporta has just completely cemented himself as the two target in the offense.
He's the wide receiver too.
Yeah, and then then we have like kind of the wild card factor of Gibbs because they did throw to Gibbs the last 2 games as well, which they hadn't done like early in the season. So if as part of this compartmentalization with Monty coming back, do they still use Gibbs as a pass game asset? But the real thing that's kind of squashed any of the elevation of the other receivers has just been Laporta is the number 2 target.
And we discussed that with Gibbs when we were trying to think about last week we were trying to think about what that would look like when Monty came back. And yeah, the positive thing for Gibbs, if you're trying to figure out what this split is with David Montgomery, is that they at least were using him in the passing game when he was that clear starter, and they haven't traditionally used a lot of running backs in the passing game. And so perhaps that's a sign that we'll get to see more out of Gibbs than we expect moving forward, even with Montgomery back. Because if he can get catches, that's not as good as having goal to go carries and goal to go
Yeah.
snaps. But if you can get catches, especially in PPR leagues, that helps to mitigate that as well. I mean, you can get 6 catches, that's a touchdown. And so there's an opportunity there for him as well. We got one question here in the chat before we move on. Full PPR start Zach Moss, Tyjae Spears, or Kareem Hunt. That's a tough that's a tough situation. My answer, if the Browns weren't playing the Ravens, would be Kareem Hunt, because Kareem Hunt, you have a decent shot at a touchdown, and I think that's probably what you're hoping for. We've seen Zach Moss's usage start to fall off recently, and so you're not particularly excited about that. Obviously, Tajay Spears, you're just hoping for a big play in the passing game. I don't know what my answer would be. Maybe it's still Hunt, just pray for a touchdown. Kind of where are you?
Yeah, that would be my answer. I just try to look box to the touchdown. I mean, he's outplaying Jerome Ford pretty significantly in the red zone when the two have been available. Jerome Ford's really living off those 2 runs he's had this year. Really living off of those.
He's not very good, or at least he hasn't been very successful. I
And
don't
now,
want to
I mean,
say
the other thing too, I mean, because this game is
their
in
offensive
Baltimore.
line.
They lost Jedrick Wills, and Jedrick Wills definitely wasn't a guy that was like setting the world on fire at left tackle. Like, this wasn't the Trent Williams situation, which we didn't really talk about the 49ers either. But like,
Yeah.
you're now down both tackles to start. So it's like, I mean, what are you getting out of Tajay Spears? Like, I don't know. It's a tough spot, man. It's a real tough spot to be in.
Yeah, 2 catches and a dream from Tajay Spears.
I'll tell you what. I will say this to Pate. Is it Pate? Peyote?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. Maybe you should
Yeah.
take some peyote to watch any of these guys play this weekend. But I'm 100% sure. I will say this with confidence, 99.9% confidence. Your fantasy outcome this weekend is not going to come down to one of these 3 players and what they do.
Fair. Yeah, so you don't have to worry about it this weekend. There you go. So it doesn't matter what our answer is. That is true on Zach Moss, right? I saw stats about that in your worksheet, which, by the way, go and read the worksheet, which you can get for free if you're listening to this on a Thursday until the end of Thursday Night Football over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. But Moss really saw his workload cut last week, right?
Yeah, and I wonder too if and obviously it was probably going to eventually ever happen with just Jonathan Taylor and the commitment to him, but he's been dealing with like a toe injury and he's missed a ton of practice the past 2 weeks, and I just wonder if that's also played a role in some of the stuff we've seen, like that he's just not fully healthy at this point.
So we're running out of time here, but I do want to talk
He
a little
burned
bit
bright
about
for us,
Commander
though.
Seahawks. What'd you say?
I said he burned bright for us though, while he did live this season. We'll always have those 5 games of Zach Moss.
There are some best ball teams that are just kept afloat by the beauty that was Zach Moss. All I need is Kyron Williams to come back, and those teams will be back to fine, and we'll be good. We are running out of time. I want to mention Commander Seahawks just because are we finally? I'm so disappointed in Gino Smith. I'm so disappointed in this passing game. Are we finally going to get a Gino Smith in a passing game breakout here? And if not now, like, we're just not going to see it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few guys I think I wrote about this week that you probably edited over and was like, I just wrote like, if not now, like, we'll win.
Win.
Gino's definitely in that boat, and this is a team that's had a ton of offensive line injuries as well, and it's definitely impacted. I mean, they were starting Jason Peters last week. Jason Peters is older than I am. Like,
he is older than both of us, which that is old.
And yeah, that's very old, kids. No, I'm looking young now these days, but that's definitely not true. My insides aren't very young. But I mean, Gino's been under pressure and under duress basically the whole season. And the Commanders in their first game without Montez Sweat and Chase Young, they only pressured Mac Jones 20% of the time. Like, if there's a spot to where they're not going to get to him, we've been picking on this defense the whole year. They're at home as almost a touchdown favorite. Like, everything is here for you. Because where Gino struggled is 3rd downs and in the red zone, it's where he's been one of the league's worst quarterbacks. That's where the Commanders have been one of the league's worst defenses. You would just hope it's a get right spot. I feel the same the way that rolls into DK Metcalf, who's been kind of let down too. You got to I know it's hard to kind of say like, I'm going to go back to Gino or I'm going to go back to DK. It's been so bad, but I think you got to give him another look this week.
Yeah, like I just think you have to roll him out there if if he's available and on the waiver wire, which he might be. I actually don't know his roster percentage in like normal home leagues, but he's been like a backing quarterback too, so he might be available. And you had Tua or you had Mahomes. Like I
Yep.
just kind of think you have to go back to him and just hope for the best, because like you said, if it's not this week, then when is
I
it?
mean, I would play
I
him
did,
over Deshaun Watson. Like if you people are playing
yeah,
Deshaun
sure,
Watson, Derek Carr, I would play Gino over Derek Carr, and
yes.
I think people have been starting him. Uh, Man, what are you about in this game? Do you play Gino over Sam Howell?
I think I do, because I do think Seattle's defense, you had a lot of great stats in the worksheet. And I've been on this for a while now that I think Seattle's pass defense is legit with both Rick Woolen and Devin Witherspoon, healthy. And so I probably play Geno Smith over Howell, but that is a conversation, which if you had told us in August that was a conversation, we would have been shocked. And so that's kind of where we are here.
Yeah. I mean, I agree too. I mean, Howell, we talk about rational coaching. Like Eric Bieniemy, I don't know what voodoo he's pulled to get Ron Rivera to like loosen his coffers, but like they are just winging it. They're just throwing the ball.
Yeah. The other side of this, by the way, and I wanted to check to make sure I was right. I am Jackson Smith and Jigba mispractice, I would say, with hip injury. So
Yeah.
that is something to keep track of if you're trying to stack Seattle and DFS. You feel a lot better about Metcalf Lockett stack if JSN's not there, because JSN's been quietly kind of getting more work as of late. And so that's something you'd feel better about for sure. All right. Let's move on to Uncut Gems. I just looked at what your Uncut Gem was. I hadn't looked at it
I
yet.
was gonna
And
put I swear I was gonna put Gino, but I was like, yeah, we're gonna talk about him anyways.
we are in agreement here with our Uncut Gems, right? We are on the same page. Who is your Uncut Gem?
Yeah, I'm going with Will Levis. Like you brought up, Tua's on by, Mahomes is on by, Jalen Hurts is on by. I doubt anyone was really starting Matthew Stafford in one quarterback leagues, but like we're missing three Gibraltars. And those are guys that probably were on rosters without a secondary quarterback. I know in the leagues where I had those guys, I wasn't carrying a second quarterback until this week. I didn't, because that guy ain't playing. He ain't getting in my lineup except for 1 week, and I wasn't going to hold a quarterback a roster spot hostage to plan for week 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yes.
like if some of these guys that we've talked about have like been already on rosters, the Baker Mayfields of the world, the Derek Carr, Sam Howell are probably already were rostered. So like Will Levis is a guy that could still maybe be out there, or maybe you grabbed him 2 weeks ago knowing that, hey, I'm in the 11th hour of being able to plan for this bye week. I'm going to grab him. Because the same thing that got us to Stroud last week, and it's definitely going to be a lot more volatile outcome with Will Levis than it is CJ Stroud. The Will Levis experience is going to be fun. I don't know where we're
I'm
gonna.
so into it.
I don't
I'm
know
so
like
into it.
where we're gonna end. I don't know where this journey actually stops. But I will say it's going to be fun. But the Bucks, since their bye week, I mean, oh my goodness, they are getting flooded. Over the past 4 weeks since their bye, they've allowed a 73% completion rate, 31st in the NFL, a league high 9.3 yards per pass attempt. They've allowed 9 touchdowns. They have 1 interception. They even allowed 10 yards per pass attempt to Desmond Ritter over that span too, if you're just looking at like kind of opponents. So like there is upside here. And they've got a decent run defense, although the Titans are going to try to run the football. So there's a volatile outcome, but I think if you're hunting to replace like QB upside, I think that Levis has that this week.
Yeah, and he has that upside because he's just pushing the ball down the field. And this is another thing we discussed yesterday in our all hands, was that you could just take the over on longest reception for every Titans wide receiver that plays. You have a decent shot at hitting
2 and
three,
3.
4 of those. Yeah, like he's pushing the ball down the field. He's throwing the ball down the field a ton. And that creates, that big play upside. And we saw that against the Falcons when he threw that was the Falcons, right? He threw 4 touchdowns against them. And it wasn't like he finished with like 238 yards or something like that, but he just was producing those big plays and producing those touchdowns. And I'm on the same boat with you. I'm taking Kyle Phillips, who I'm hoping is going to get more run this week. It seems like Treylon Burks is not going to play. He didn't
No.
practice on Wednesday. We'll see kind of where that goes. But Kyle Phillips has not played a ton of snaps and run a ton of routes over the last 2 weeks, but he has been targeted on 22.2% of his routes with Will Levis at quarterback. The Bucks are allowing 9.1 yards per target to slot receiver this season with 5 touchdowns, which is 31st and 24th respectively. 2 of their corners didn't practice on Wednesday. I mean, like everything points to this being a really good matchup for the Titans passing game. And so I'm gonna take a shot on Kyle Phillips in deeper leagues, or if I'm really struggling with some bye weeks.
He's min price
What
on DraftKings too.
what is his price on DraftKings? Actually, I haven't
Three.
had a
He's
chance to
min
look at it.
price. He's min priced. He's 3K.
Oh yeah, that's lock that in. That is he was min priced on the Showdown lineup too with them. I think he was 200 on Showdown, and he ended up with like 68 yards. How did he end up min price again in the main slate? That's a mistake. I will be taking a lot of that. And I didn't know that yet, but he will be in a lot of lineups for me in DFS
It's a
this
week in
week.
DFS where we're really void of those kind of cheapy punts, especially on DraftKings. We'll see what opens up. I mean, if Drake London doesn't play, I think some people will get the like Kadero Hodge at 3,400. You'll probably even see some Westbrook Akine at 3,400 from the same matchup. But we are really, if JSN especially doesn't play XP, I think people are hoping to play JSN at 4,100 on DraftKings. We don't have the Demario Douglas of this week, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I will say about Westbrook Akine is that that's not bad either.
Yeah.
Because if Treylon Burks is out, he's going to play. And we know what the big play upside is there. So you could just get one play out of him as well. So I wouldn't be mad at that either. All right, we got to get out of here. Anything you're looking at in week 10? Anything really standing out to you?
No, I think this is a fun week. I'm into a lot of the players. You know, it started out like when I write you the worksheet games and in order, and like I'm like, is this slate not that good? And then once I hit like a span where I got to like, Titans, Bucks, 49ers, Jaguars, Lions, Chargers, and like I was like, oh, there's some fun plays out here this week. It's just
Yeah,
when
and
you
there's
start
some
with
fun
Panthers
games like
Bears, you're like, oh.
yeah, the primetime games we talked about at the beginning kind of soured the overall. The headlines are not great, but they're interesting games in here. And even like Browns Ravens, which that's not interesting from a fantasy perspective because I mean you're playing Lamar, you're playing Mark Andrews, it is what it is, but you're not excited about anything in that game. But from like a real life perspective, seeing those two defenses and seeing kind of what Deshaun Watson can do, because the last time the Ravens played the Browns, they played Thompson
Yeah.
Robinson. And so did I get that order of his name right or did I switch it? I think I got it right.
No, you got it right. Thompson Robinson.
There we go. But so like we are, we're interested to see these two teams, a Browns team that outside of quarterback is a Super Bowl roster, and against this Ravens team that has been an absolute juggernaut. That's a great game. And so we are starting to see, I think, a little bit a few better games. And so I'm hopeful for that. You can check out, as I've mentioned several times, if you're listening to this on Thursday, if you're listening to this on Friday, the free week is already going to be over. We have lots of great options at the website as well. So go to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Either way, but if you're listening to this on Thursday before the Thursday night football game, this is the final day of free week. You get 7-day free trial over at sharp.football. Go and check out how you get that. Make sure you stay tuned to the podcast. We have a great podcast coming out on Thursday night with Todd Burrows and with Ryan McChrystal talking about betting and DFS. I'll be back on Sunday to do the recap podcast. A lot of great stuff. Head over to the YouTube, search Warren Sharp. You'll find our YouTube channel so you can catch us when we go live. And we will be back to talk to you soon.